And we're live. Hey, folks, thanks for tuning into the BAMF podcast, our move to Thursday, Wednesday Writers Chat. Here with Ryan Danks. How you doing, Ryan?
Good, how are you?
All right, good to see you again, sir. J.R. Handley, noted science fiction writer. How you doing, sir?
Doing great.
Yeah. Walt Robillard, who's still alive, I'm happy to say. And Jason Tondro, who is now employed in the Starfinder mines at Paizo. Good to have you, sir.
It's a real privilege to be here. Thank you.
Oh, glad to have you. Now, we often talk about various aspects of the writer's life to sound pretentious as fuck. One of the things we talk about is how do you get the words down? How do you write? And from following your Twitter, you mentioned that you just got down, pre-show you said, what, 90,000 words in the last 3 months?
Yeah, well, so I have a day job, right? Like my day job is I'm a developer for Paizo, and I work on Starfinder Adventures. But we also, at Paizo, we do a lot of freelance. Like all of our work is freelance. 95% of it, we hire other people to actually write it. Now, but often, Paizo being an RPG company that's filled with a bunch of RPG nerds, all of whom are poor, we often hire our own employees as freelancers to also write those books, but they write them off the clock, right? Like they write them by night. So that's what I was doing. I had 2 Adventure Path volumes, one for Starfinder and one for Pathfinder. And their deadlines were basically the same day, like the last day in March, and they were both due. Now, for those of you that don't know, a Starfighter Adventure Path is about 64 pages, and my assignment for that was about 35,000 words. And that's including the adventure and some additional stuff in the back, like new monsters and a starship and, like stuff like that. And then the Pathfinder Adventure volume is longer. That's like 96 pages, and I wrote the entire thing cover to cover for that. Well, I did not want these 2 things to be coming in at the same time. That was not my intention. I was just asking for a job, But when somebody offers you, you know how it is as a freelancer, like every gig could be the last gig, right? Like it's really hard to say no. And so which is one of the great morals of this story today, by the way. If anybody takes this, takes something away from this, it's learn like when to say no. But anyway, so I took these 2 jobs, and I'm very lucky in that I knew the developers that were working for both of them. So I could say, listen, I've got these 2 gigs at the same time. I'm going to do one of them really fast, really early, do the Starfinder one first, and then I'll turn and do the Pathfinder one. But that disrupted our normal system. So normally we have what's called a milestone, which is you work on the project for about half of its length, and you show what you've got to the developer, and then you get some feedback. Well, because of the nature of this, I wasn't going to have the milestone for the Pathfinder one done until very, very late, because I was writing the Starfinder one. And I would turn in the whole Starfinder thing by the time the milestone was due, right? So it was but I could talk to these guys. I could say, this is where I am. And they were like, okay, yeah. And this is not my first rodeo. I have written for both of these games before. So they had a little bit of confidence in me and that I would be able to deliver on time. Well, so then we had the great challenge of actually sitting down and doing the project, right? Now, we get an outline from the developer that tells us in like 6 or 8 pages, or sometimes even fewer, what the whole adventure is. But then my job is to do a longer, more expanded outline. And so I'm a planner. I'm not a pantser, at least when it comes to RPG writing, right? Like I find outlines very helpful, and I put a lot of detail into it, and I kind of build out from that outline. When you're doing an adventure, you've got a lot of different things that are sort of, you don't just have the story. You also have things like mechanical issues, like you have to do a bunch of stat blocks, right? And you have to do treasure and XP, and you have to hit certain numbers for all those things. So there's a spreadsheet, right? You have to do some planning and figure out, okay, well, what are all of the encounters I'm going to have in this adventure? that are going to give the treasure and the XP necessary to get the player characters to the next level by the time they hit page whatever, right? Like there's a certain mechanical formula that goes into all this, and you have to kind of figure out all of those encounters, and that goes into the outline that you send back to your developer. And then that gives them a chance to give you some feedback on all of that. Then, once you have the outline, you can start actually writing the thing and taking all those encounters that you've kind of brainstormed and turning them into a full-blown settings. A huge step of this is the map. I find I love drawing these maps for adventures. I'm not very good at them. I don't claim to be a master cartographer. I have seen maps that players have that authors have drawn for these adventures, and they blow my mind. Like they're just so talented. I am not that. I'm like, okay, I'll draw the walls, and anything inside the walls is like up to the official artist to draw, right? But I find that as I physically draw the map, it really helps me get a feel for the place and to kind of I get a lot of new ideas from drawing the map. So a lot of encounters that might seem very simple or elementary in the outline stage, it's 3 of these monsters worth X much XP and there's this kind of treasure in the room. They really come to life once I draw the map, and I have to think about the terrain, and I have to find a way to make it interesting, because players, they want interesting encounters. They don't want to just trudge through a dungeon like, okay, you're in a 10-foot by 10-foot room and there's 3 shriekers in there. Like that's not interesting, right? So often I'll do the maps and then the stat blocks, especially if I'm relatively new to the game. And all of these mechanical things help me get kind of into the actual writing of the project, because it's a lot of words, right? And I don't just start on page 1 and write all the way through. I do kind of all of the non-narrative stuff first, the stat blocks, the maps, the encounters, and then I can start actually writing. And once I sit down and I start writing narrative stuff, it all goes pretty quickly. We just had somebody comment, shouldn't you all be writing? So I want to kind of address this, because I want to recommend Chuck Wendig's wonderful, gentle writing advice thread on Twitter. He's also put these things up on his blog, Chuck Wendig's blog. We do get a lot of pressure as writers to have our foot planted in it, our butt planted in a chair, and writing at our desk every day. Sometimes that doesn't work, man. Like I had to do 90,000 words. I did not do 1,000 words a day every day for 90 days. I needed time to think, man. I needed time to sit away from it. I had other things going on in my life. And there you go. We've got a link for it up on the screen. A lot of people, Chuck wrote this column, why gentle writing advice exactly, because he saw somebody giving like really tough kind of, hard and bitter writing advice. Like everybody else out there, everybody else that's writing are your competitors. You gotta think of this as like a competition, right? Like, you gotta be, okay, writing is hard, folks. Like we need to be easy on ourselves. We need to be kind and gentle to ourselves. And sometimes it's going to come and sometimes it isn't.
Just to give you some context on that, JR has written a novel in the Galaxy's Edges universe that was well received.
Yeah.
So he's getting a lot of fan pressure sometimes from Nathan in our comment section here about writing the next book.
Yeah, okay. Well,
Reserve 3. We're not even done editing 2 yet.
well, y'all need to give JR some slack here. That's what needs to happen.
So the problem with this is all Jason and Nick's platform is they're like on crack or something, so they write so fast that their editors can't keep up. It's a bottleneck.
I don't want to do this again. Like I enjoy writing. Sitting down and actually writing is fun, but the pressure of like having that much manuscript to get done in a short amount of time, that got to me. And like my body has a long history of reacting badly to stress. Like I physical stuff happens to me when I'm under stress.
I'm the same way. My when my body's under stress, I pull the trigger faster
Yeah. Okay. Well.
and punch harder.
Well, I break out in hives. And
No. Yeah, that doesn't do well.
Yeah.
So you've got a unique set of constraints on you that we don't as regular novelists, because you actually have to play test your game too, I would imagine, right?
Oh, okay. So, Jer, this is your okay. So first off, I want to note, like, I've got fiction projects that I wrote before gaming, and I want to get back to them. Like, I cannot wait for this shit to all get turned in so I can go back to writing crazy stories about wizards in Spain. Like, but here's the thing. When we are given 2 months to write an adventure that's 40,000 words, there is no time to play test this thing, right? And so you have to hire people that know the game and have enough experience running GMing that you can trust them to write an adventure that does what you need it to do. And then it goes to the developer, which in my case is either Jason Keeley, my Starfighter developer, or Patrick Rennie, my Pathfinder developer. And they're there to sort of give everything a once-over and try to make it better and catch any things that will not play right. But we have time to play test big new rule systems, like when we create a new class, we do a public play test for the game. But our adventures, with some exceptions, there's not enough time to play test them. Now, if you're writing a long series, like if you're writing a 6-volume adventure path, the later volumes, there is enough time. Ron Lundeen, a wonderful colleague of mine who works at Paizo, and he's written like 13 Pathfinder adventures. The guy's insane. But we all hire him because he delivers on time. And we all know that he's really reliable. Well, if you give him like volume 5, volume 6 in a 6-volume series, he's got a weekly Starfinder group, and he'll just play it all through with them. And the product is a lot better for it. But he has the luxury of 6 months to do that with.
Yeah, I can attest to that. When we developed Jade Punk, the production time was so short, and it was my first game, so I didn't know what I was doing. I'm like, just got lucky. But we play tested the thing for like 10 minutes. And so after it was all done, someone was like, so how do you heal? And I was like, we forgot recovery rules. So I just like, the Fate has recovery rules, follow that.
Now, I just want to know, do you get to hang out like online, like on a video chat like this? Do you get to hang out with Wayne Reynolds?
Wayne is such a nice guy. I have only ever interacted with Wayne at Gen Con.
Right on. And if you don't know, Wayne is the guy that does the majority of Paizo art, which is just that dungeon punk / Starfinder punk aesthetic is just glorious.
Wayne, this is not Wayne on the cover here.
Yeah.
Wayne does the art for like the core rule books. Or Wayne, and also importantly to us, he does the character design for all of our iconic characters.
I love his elves.
What's that?
His elves. I love them.
Oh, yeah. Well, the iconic characters, like, all of those, like, the rogue, the thief, the wizard and everything. All of those characters are very important to Paizo's marketing and brand, and so they work it's very important for them that Wayne does those character designs, and it's all part of the marketing strategy. Anyway, super nice guy. I see him once a year.
So you did so with your writing, you had at what point, like, you were set up with the mechanics and everything early on then, and then you got to writing?
Generally, yeah. Now that's not always true, but generally true.
Yeah. So then what after that, it was just that once you got the mechanics done, it became 1,000, 2,000 words a day most days?
Well, no. So I'll go in spurts, right? Like I needed to, I'm a procrastinator like a lot of other human beings. So I put it off, right? But I needed to sit down and work on it like 1,000 words, 2,000 words a day for a few days, a week, to kind of get through that initial push, right? So I would sit down and I started, those of you that follow me on Twitter, I did like a Daredevil rewatch. So I gave myself a reward.
Charlie Cox or Ben Affleck?
No, the Charlie Cox. If I did 1,000 words of writing in a night, I could watch an episode of Daredevil and live tweet it, which I love doing. So I did that like for the first 3 or 4 days, and that got me into my habit again. Because let's talk about the habit of writing. Like, again, this goes back to that you shouldn't be writing. Like, well, I needed to build that habit when I was much younger. Like, I needed to work every day, and it was a big deal for me so that I could build that habit. But now that I know I can crank out 6,000 words in one day if I put in 3 shifts, I have like a 2 to 3 hour kind of writing shift that I'll do maybe in the afternoon or the evenings, and I'll get, a couple of thousand words out of it. And so so if it's a Saturday, like I'll go to Panera and I'll work for 2 or 3 hours, and then I'll come home and I'll hang out with the dogs, and then I'll put in an afternoon stint, and then I'll get some dinner, and then I'll put in an evening stint, right? So I can get like 5,000 or 6,000 words done in one day. That's a big major commitment though. I don't normally do a 3-shift day. I might do 2. Like, it's pretty common for me to do a 2-shift day on the Saturdays and Sundays.
Man, I used to go to Panera and write in the old days, in the before times.
Yeah.
I still go, but I wear a Mandalorian helmet.
Nice.
I need to get one that fits big-headed people.
So because I know I've established, because I did the routine, I did the habitual 1,000 words a day or whatever writing every day for so long, I have a lot of confidence in my ability to hit the deadline. So I know that if I need to take a few days to just let this adventure simmer in the back of my head for a few minutes, I can do that, and I can come back and catch up. I'm not too worried about it.
Hey, JR had a question. He was raising his hand backstage. JR, you want to go ahead with that?
So this is a writing advice podcast. So I'm going to ask you to give some advice. So what advice would you give someone who isn't an established author in any of the genres, who wants to break into writing RPG settings or manuals or any of the things for the RPG industry? What advice would you give someone looking to break in?
Yeah,
Walt's advice is generally day drinking.
Well, I would also preface this by saying, Jason, before you give the advice he's looking for, give the advice he didn't ask for, which is the very first piece of advice you have quoted on this show before that Brandon gave to you way back in the day.
I'm not even sure.
If you want to start,
yeah. Well, the best way to make a small fortune in gaming is to start with a large fortune.
Thank you.
What was it? I didn't hear.
The best way to make a small fortune in gaming is to start with a large fortune.
Oh.
Brandon Blackmore gave that to me when he hired me years ago. So first off, can we get a link in the show notes to my how I got my job in gaming that I wrote for Fifth World blog? Because I've answered this question a lot, and people might find those answers helpful. The best advice I can give you is you don't need to work for Paizo or WotC or any of those companies to publish role-playing game stuff. The gatekeepers are gone now. Now, that doesn't mean that it's easy, because as Ryan will tell you, as Walt and Mike can all tell you, you got art direction and layout to do. You've got the whole marketing and sales stuff to do, but you can do that. You can do some of that or all of it yourself if you're willing to put in the time and the energy. So you can go on to DM's Guild or whatever, and you can use the tools they give you on DM's Guild, and you can write a 5,000 word D&D adventure. And it's not that hard to lay out. I mean, they give you a bunch of the tools to do it. You obey the restrictions of DM's Guild. And, in a month or two, you have a published adventure. When you go to another company and you pitch yourself to them, show them that you are already doing the job that you are asking them to be able to do. You've already got published credits. You've already now, and you're gonna say, well, like some of these things, you're gonna sell like 50 copies, right? Or 10. That doesn't matter. Nobody cares how many it sells. What they care about is that you were on that learning curve. You learned all that shit that you only learn by physically doing it, right? So for people, when people come to me and they ask to write for Paizo, and they have never written anything published before, I often send them to Wayfinder, a fantastic fanzine that comes out once a year in May for PaizoCon, which is a wonderful place for new authors to debut their art or writing or editing skills. And we have hired people straight out of the pages of Wayfinder. So that's a great platform for people that want to write for Paizo.
And that's a big thing too, because I mean, if you're just rolling up and being like, "Yes, I would like to start a gaming fanzine," and you just roll in and you've never done the work before, you've never seen what it takes, you don't know how to write something to accommodate a layout. Yeah, it's exactly like making mods for a video game. Yeah, pretty much. But I mean, if you do the work ahead of time and say, look, I've learned all these techniques and tricks and stuff like this, and this is why I am valuable. Like example, right? Agents of BAMF. We were playing this on the show the other day, right? This has professional layout, great art, good writing. The premise is fun, and the game is fun and fast to play. It shows it's a one-stop showcase of a person who is not only a writer, but also a person who can wrangle all the different aspects of RPG design and creation. And that serves as like your resume. It's like, look, I produced 27 products like this. I do this and I call it Tuesday. This is why you want to hire me. Versus, yeah, well, I've never really done anything before, but like I have really good ideas and my hair is purple.
The one of the challenges here is quite frankly, we need to hire people that can deliver. Yes. Right. Like there's an old expression. You have to. Are you an earner? Right. It's a mobster phrase. Right. Are you a person who actually brings in money for the mob? Can you deliver the goods? If I've got to hire somebody to write like, I don't know, maybe a 3,000 word gazetteer on some bizarre planet. And I got a date that those words have to be turned in by. And I need to hire people that I know can deliver. Now that, and because if you don't deliver, I'm going to have to write it myself, and I ain't got time for that. Right? But yes, there is a lot of other stuff to it too. There's not just the ability to deliver. Neil Gaiman, in his wonderful graduation speech at an art college in New York, said that like you're going to get your job wherever you get jobs, but you're going to get repeat jobs. People are going to come back to you based on three things, right? You're going to be pleasant to work with, your work is going to be good, and you're going to be on time. But they'll take 2 out of 3. So if you're good and you're on time, it's okay if you're kind of a jerk. And if you're good and you're nice, then people will let you be a little late. And
that's how I select my dogs.
And if you're nice and you're on time, you don't have to be as good as everybody else. That's totally true, folks. That's totally true.
And being not a nice person is probably the one you least want. Because every artist I worked with who was amazing and on time, but was a total douche, I never asked them for more work.
All right, fair enough.
I hated working with them.
Yeah.
I talked to Dennis O'Neill, Jesus Christ, back when he was alive, let's say 30 years ago. And he was like, the best artists of your generation, you don't ever see their work. You don't know. I mean, well, how come? Because I get so many portfolios at conventions from guys who can't put down the game controller.
Yeah.
Amazing work. They can't finish a goddamn book.
Yeah. Well,
God, that's convicting for me.
I'm in this post and I don't like it. Yeah.
Wow.
Like while I was writing all of this, I got my PS5 like a month and a half ago, right?
I'm jealous.
And so
I should throw my Xbox out the window, I guess.
So I'm like, well, I could write on this adventure, or I could play Miles Morales Spider-Man. And I have never.
Tough call.
What's that?
That's a tough call.
Yeah, I have never been so glad for a short game. Like I played Miles Morales, and it's a short game. I was able to finish it in like a week, and I'm like, cool, sweet, back to the work.
I had to stop playing the game because Walt kept telling me every time RPG stuff would come up, this isn't Skyrim, JR.
I really believe that if those of you that are out there working and you're writing and you're trying to finish a manuscript, and I've written comics, and I've written novels, and I've written role-playing game material and poetry and screenplays. But listen, if you are new, if you are just getting into it, then yes, build that habit of like sitting in the seat and working on it every day. But once you have established that you can do that, cut yourself a little slack. Be kind to yourself. Be considerate and compassionate, and allow yourself to take time away and read or play or experience nature, and know that you can come back and you will finish it when you are ready to finish it. And know that every project is different. Sometimes you can just start on page 1 and write to the end. But sometimes you got to write the ending. Sometimes you got to do little pieces. Like sometimes you'll attack the part that's hardest first. This is an old habit I got from my dissertation director, who was always like, okay, well, what are you lousy at? And I'm like, poetry. He's like, okay, well, then that's where we start. And by the time I was done, I was my best part, right? Because that was the part that he zeroed in on. So sometimes writing is like that. You'll pick the part that's the hardest, the part you have the most anxiety over, and you write that first. Or maybe you want to, maybe this isn't that book. Maybe this is a different project where you have to write the fun stuff first, and you'll figure out the hard part as you get there.
I actually like Joss Whedon says similar. He says he writes his dessert first.
Yeah.
And all of the scenes he really loves, and then putting everything together and between them feels like less work because he's motivated to get it out there.
Yeah, I get that.
I do the opposite. I when I have the fun scenes that I want to write, I force myself to slog through the connecting parts of the story because that lets me get to the fun stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm always kind of suspicious of those fun parts anyway as a writer, because I always feel like I'm just personally attached to them and they really ought to be cut anyway. Like they're not as cool as I think they are. But fortunately, that's why we have developers, right? Like developers can help trim this stuff that I'm too personally attached to. My darling.
So speaking of developing things, would the advice you give for someone to start off trying to make their own engine, start off writing supplements in someone else's sort of open world?
Yeah. Well, okay, so write your passion. Like RPGs are not a financially lucrative occupation. The reward of this job is the artistic expression.
Also
like
fame.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Tons of fame. But what I'm getting at is, I mean, you're going to get some money for it. If we're doing it right, we're going to get paid. And I can keep my dogs in dog food and with the money I get from this job. But a lot of the real reward comes from seeing the things that you have made exist and then watching other people play them.
100%.
So if your joy is creating a world or creating a system, then do that. But figure out where your joy is. If you just want to, you don't have to do that. Like if you want to just write D&D adventures and publish them, or write for any one of the numerous other competing game systems with open licenses, you can do that and get your joy however you want to get it, man. But your point is good, which is ask yourself, why am I in there? What are my goals? Yeah, hey, Gary's here. And what do you have to do to make this fulfilling for you? And then try and do that, which is not easy, but yeah.
But definitely get a hand on, if you're looking at creating and doing your own system, see what makes other systems work first and work in those so that you understand the mechanics behind it versus just jumping in willy-nilly and saying, oh yeah, I'm just going to put these separate mechanics together because they'll work. I'm sure they will. I mean, it's just dice, right? You know,
Not
so
the
like,
90s anymore. You
I
can't
feel
do that.
attacked.
yeah, but in answer to something Jason was saying, one of the most exciting things for me when I woke up today, and I work at night, so I wake up in the middle of the afternoon. I roll over and I got my giant 70-pound Malinois in my face, and he's like, "Dude, let's walk." And it's like, I can't have coffee, I can't do anything. The first thing I got to do is take him out and take him for at least a 2-mile walk, and part of that we have to run. But one of the great things was I rolled over and my friend Antonio, who I met on Facebook a couple of years ago, and just an awesome all around dude. But his primary language is Spanish. So, he's a school teacher, he's an educator, but he loves RPGs, and he decided to put, a supers adventure together.
Yeah.
Using one of our old adventures, and broadcast it in Spanish.
Oh, nice.
Do like a live play in Spanish. And I was listening to that on my walk today, and I was just having a giggle fit. My dog's looking at me like, "Bro, are you okay? Can I go eat that?" So it's just like it, but it was so much fun to have, not only see that adventure. Yeah, exactly, Elvis. I know your pain. But it was so much fun to not only see that adventure come to life for somebody else's table, but also hear it in another language, which was just absolutely spectacular. Luckily, I speak Spanish; otherwise, that would have been weird. It was a fantastic to see that energy and fun erupting at the table, and that was something I'd written 10 years ago that they took and modified, and it was awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I had someone write to me. Last 2 weeks, he was playing an adventure for Icons 10 years ago. The one with the zombie submarine.
Yes!
Icons. Yeah. Aqua Zombies of the Kriegsmarine. I still like that stupid title.
From Improbable Tales.
Yeah, he had a great time with it. And I was
That's just begging to be novelized. You have all these great ideas. I want the books.
Yeah.
I'll
So
send
what you
them to
do is you go on Drive Through RPG and you buy Mike's entire catalog right now. I'm working for you, Mike. And then you just shamelessly rip them off for novel ideas and give them a royalty.
Well,
Well,
those
if I'm
two
giving
things
you
are.
royalty,
those
I don't
two
need to be
things
shameless.
Yeah, you can be shameless and not pay me. It's cheaper.
Yes, but we have him online saying that he was going to rip you off, so he's going to pay you.
Just send me beer. I'm in RPGs. I work cheap, so
Yeah.
Trying
to struggle into fiction where I'll get to work slightly less cheap. Maybe I don't know. So
yeah, and fiction. I was convinced I was just a bad fiction writer for a very long time, and I've now decided, fuck it, I'm going to write it anyway, and I don't care. I don't care if people think I'm bad. I'm going to write it anyway because I enjoy doing it.
If you listen to the podcast, it sounds like you do. I mean, there's a lot of people who self-publish via Kindle and Audible and a few other platforms, and they find an audience out there. I mean, it used to be gatekeepers like in RPGs, and now, there's much less of that.
When I was an English professor and for 5 years, and when I had a student in my freshman comp class, and every year for National Novel Writing Month, she would write a book. And it was always like a college story about like a vampire and a human girl, right? And it was this sort of supernatural romance stuff. And she published that stuff on Amazon, and she had about 4 or 5 books when I met her. And she had made about $5,000 off of them. And now I was her English teacher, so I'm allowed to say, like, she was not very good. Okay. But she did the work, and if she didn't make that $5,000 from those books, she would not have been able to go to college. Like, I was teaching in a pretty financially struggling area, and her family would never have had the money to send her to school. So she wrote these books on Amazon Kindle and bought her own way with her own novels. And God bless her heart, that was fantastic. So
there's an audience out there for everything. I mean, I remember back in the day sweating trying to get into, there was like 3 or 4 big science fiction fantasy magazines. And it was just so hard to try to figure out the taste of a particular editor and get in. And these days you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
JR and I did it the weird way. We went into the military, then paid for college, and then used all of that pain to now write fiction.
It's good therapy too. So hopefully that student writes better now that she's had your class.
Well, she does also. I think so. But if a 19-year-old college freshman can write a 50,000-word novel in a year, so can you. And I'm talking to the audience, and so can any of us. Right? You can do it. You can do it, and you'll be proud of yourself when you're done.
Right on. Absolutely.
Especially with Kickstarter. I mean, Agents of BAMF we showed earlier. I wrote that kind of on a lark because I love the system. It's a streamlined version of the Black Hack, which is an old school D&D hack. And a guy named Eric Bloat smoothed out the rough edges, and he published a game called Valor Knights, which was just G1 Transformers with D&D rules. We played on the podcast a few times. I loved it. I was like, I could do super agents with this because I've never had a system that really did it right. And this is because I just want something fun and fast.
Yeah.
I don't want emulation. I don't want physics emulation as much as just genre emulation.
Yeah.
And so I just wrote it for fun, commissioned the art for fun. Then I was like, well, I'm going to sell it. You know what? Zine Quest is happening. Zine Quest is this thing they do on Kickstarter just to celebrate short, what they call magazine style RPGs on the third year. So I said, fuck it, I'll put it up for the last 2 weeks of that, and I made $1,000. Covered my production costs, bought all the art, and
congratulations.
Nice. Just point I'm trying to make in a long-winded way is that with crowdfunding and all the platforms you got, it's a lot easier to get your work in front of an appreciative audience than it used to be. You don't have to do what you're doing back in the day, which is trying to figure out what the guy who edits this magazine, or the guy who edits Asimov's, what he's into, and how do you break in there, because that magazine isn't even around anymore.
Now, I will note that at Paizo, at least, we have done a lot of open calls lately. Designers and developers. Logan Bonner did one. He's one of our Pathfinder designers. He helped to design Pathfinder 2nd Edition. And Mike Kimmel, who's an organized play developer. So he creates the organized play scenarios that we put out 2 or 4 for each. I think we put out 2 of them for each game every month. So there's a constant need for new writers. And these are like 10,000-word scenarios that are designed to be adventures that you can play in one night. They've got like 5 to 6 encounters, and they've got some very specific sort of restrictions, and you'll be given an outline. Well, it's a great place for new writers to show what they can do. And Mike did an open call. And
I didn't know you guys were doing that. Shoot us a link next time. We'll put that out there.
Yeah. Well, Mike did it on his own Twitter feed, right? And Logan also did it on his Twitter feed. So I would recommend find developers and designers, people in the game industry whom you like, whose work you like, not just who are nice people, but whose work you like. Follow them on social media and get into that networking, which who is part of the job still.
So I feel like we've been talking for. Oh, sorry, gotta do ahead, JR.
I was gonna say they did the math once, and they said something like 80 to 90% of people, if you ask them, say they'd love to write a novel one day, and only 1% like ever finish it. I don't know the exact stats because I've heard variants of it. So yeah, you're right when you say that with the Nano. I know some professional authors sort of snoot out, oh, that's not November, that's every day. But everyone's got to start somewhere, right? Like,
that's right. I
agree with it. It's a good way to find your community too, because they've got the local organizations.
I got 2 bits of really good writing advice when I was just getting started. One was from Aaron Alston, wonderful game writer, but also novelist. I met him once at a Gen Con before his far too untimely passing. And we were talking about projects, and I had a bunch of games I was writing and stuff. And he was like, well, until you have a manuscript, you've got nothing. Right? Well, I can come up with ideas all day long, but until you have an actual physical manuscript with the end on it, you haven't. So that, how do you get to that? How do you finish? And I worked at a bookstore for many years, and was down in Southern California, and we would have guest authors come in. Our prize store we got Ray Bradbury to come in once and talk to us, but we had a bunch of, Southern California writers grow on trees down there, right? They're like everywhere. But we got somebody to come in, and he was talking about how he wrote, and he said, listen, I never go back and revise anything until I hit the end of the first draft. Otherwise you'll revise the first draft, the first chapter. You'll just go back and endlessly revise the first chapter, right? So instead, just keep on writing, never revise anything until you type the end. Okay, now I can go back and fix things. Because now you have a manuscript. It's not perfect. It's got a lot of problems, but you have a manuscript, right? I found these 2 bits of advice very helpful to me when I was building that initial habit of getting to the end of projects. I would allow myself to go back and revise to whatever I had written the day before. Like I would read whatever, if it's Tuesday and I'm writing, I would read what I wrote Monday and I would revise what I wrote Monday, but then I would keep on going. And then, but you can only, so I would give myself a little bit of it. But honestly, like just don't look back, look forward. And that got me to the end.
So since we're talking about day drinking in the columns, to change subjects, Jason, when you're writing 90,000 words in 3 months, how much did you open a bottle of scotch and just let inspiration flow? Or is that something you avoid when you're writing?
Listen, caffeine is far more important to me than scotch when I have to hit word count, right? Like, and I'm not even kidding. Like, I would finish a work day. I've been working at that computer for Paizo, right, since 9 a.m., 10 a.m. in the morning. And now I have to go put in a couple of hours at my kitchen table or on my lap desk typing on freelance stuff. I need some energy, man. And I pour out a glass of Diet Coke and I have like 3 glasses of Diet Pepsi every night just to keep the energy up to write. And it means that I have a hard time sleeping sometimes. But no, I'm a caffeine. That's what I need to keep me going.
I know Ryan will agree with me, but you get that afternoon slog, and what I'd do is I'd kennel up the dog, hop in the car, and I would go fight for 2 hours when the pandemic wasn't on. I'd glove up and hit the mats with 12, 15 of my buddies, and we'd have class, we'd do organized stuff, and then we'd put on the pads and just bang for 30, 40 minutes. And when I got home, man, I was so energized, like, yeah, let's get some work done.
Well, you and I have very different ways to energize ourselves.
Or like if I'm really like in a scene where I feel like I'm not in the right headspace, I can go in my backyard, and I have like a long stretch of my backyard with a backstop. So I'll pull my bows off the wall and I'll throw down 40, 50 arrows. And that sense of control of finding the happy place between the string and the target and it just kind of like maneuvered me into the right headspace for certain scenes.
See, that's what it is. I'm not going to recommend everybody go out there and punch somebody for 2 hours, but your observation that you had to find that happy place, right? Like
the headspace.
That's the kernel. Like everybody's headspace is different. Everybody's going to find that happy spot in your own personal, unique way. And I taught writing for years, both as a professor and as an adjunct faculty member. 15 years I was teaching people, and we talked about writing process. Literally, like every time we had to talk about process, and everybody's process is different. But the trick is to self-reflect. Ask yourself, okay, when am I most productive during the day? What do I need to be able to write better? Do I need more? Do I need music? Do I need talking? That's why I went to places like Panera, because everybody was busy, but nobody was paying any attention to me. I could nurse a Diet Pepsi for 2 hours and nobody cared, right? Like it's a perfect working environment for me. I'm telling you, I wrote like my entire dissertation in the Panera in Riverside, California.
Awesome.
But that's because that's what I needed, right? Like every person of us is on something different. Nathan's got, on day 815. All right, very good. Very good. You got a track record to go. But not everybody needs that 815 days in a row. Your blasters and blades, right? Find your healthy, happy place. That's exactly right. Figure out like what do you need to make your process work, and then do that then.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's hard because we live in a world where we have very little time for self-reflection. We are not encouraged to look at ourselves and think about ourselves very often.
And that's why dogs are so important to the writing process. Because like you could be so just like jammed up, like, oh, the writer's block is real right now and the caffeine isn't helping. Yeah. I even started, going Kentucky coffee by throwing whiskey in the coffee, and that didn't help. And you leash up that dog, and suddenly those endorphins of you just out, fresh air, animal jumping around, because this is a thing, the only thing on the planet that is happier for being with you than you are.
Yeah.
And you just, all of a sudden something in those endorphins kick in, and that one thing you've been having trouble with, it's like, oh, that bastard did it, and then you just like you get that breakthrough moment in the scene, and it's all because of your dog.
my Saturday and Sunday afternoons, I would do this thing called my dog day afternoons, where I would have been out in the morning working, writing, and then I would come home and I'd have a couple of hours before I had to worry about dinner or whatever. And I would just lie on the bed, and the dogs would jump up with me, and I would scroll Twitter, or I would nap, or I would just hang out. I'm not out there running like you, man. I'm a sedentary writer, but yeah, like just. I would I would just curl up with my dogs for a couple of hours, and it helped me rejuvenate. You know, it was just nice. It was just
See,
fun.
Mike took our advice way too literally, right? Because he ended up with like this small dog, and then that wasn't enough dogs, so he got 2 dogs crammed into one. He went out and got a Great Dane and was like, "I'll show you."
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I have a Corgi and a Great Dane. For Halloween, we're gonna have one be a snow speeder, one be the AT-AT. It's gonna be awesome.
I support this message.
Yeah.
The Great Dane is 4.5 months old, 5 months old right now, and all the energy and springiness of a puppy, but like 70 pounds. And she's gonna be like 110 when she's done. And oh, good lord, it's a lot.
Yeah, I just bought puppies a couple weeks ago, and there was a Great Dane there. It was huge.
What'd you get?
I got a Shih Tzu Poo, so it's this little toy poodle Shih Tzu thing. It's tiny. And then a Puggle, a pug.
Oh,
right on.
Those are fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't even say those names with a straight face.
I have a very nice lady in comfortable shoes who comes over to train my Great Dane, and she was like, "Yeah, you need to buy a cup." I didn't want you to tell me that because she's going through a very mouthy phase right now, and she's got those milk teeth. And,
Oh my gosh.
yeah,
You didn't want any
all
more
right.
kids, right?
No. So, well, Jason, it's been a real pleasure having you, sir. We should have you back in the future. I'd say next week, but I know you're a very busy man because you just wrote 90,000 words in 3 months. So,
Well, I have one relatively short gaming commitment still to write, which is like 8,000 words for an upcoming book that we haven't announced yet, which is like 2 weekends for me, and I can knock that out. And then I am taking a freelancer vacation. I need to recharge.
Miles Morales, Spider-Man.
Right. Well, it's the damn thing.
Cyberpunk.
Elder Scrolls Skyrim.
I want to write fiction again. I have a couple of short stories I've written, and I really enjoy them. I want to go back and write some more of those. They have no audience. They'll probably never be published, but I want to write them anyway. Mike has graciously offered to publish a short story of mine, so I have to write that for him. And I'm really looking forward to it. And the fact is that I took a lot of these freelancing gigs, especially once I came to Seattle, because I needed it. Like we don't get paid very well, and if I didn't have freelancing contracts, I would not have made rent. Right? Like living in Seattle is insane. But I'm not in that position anymore, and so I don't have to do it. And so I need to unlearn my habit of always saying yes to every possible freelancer opportunity. You don't have to do that anymore. You can take the jobs that you want, and you can not take the jobs you don't need, and you can trust that there will be more jobs. Right? There will be more opportunities later. Every contract is not the last contract you're ever going to get.
Groovy.
Solid advice.
Thanks for having me on.
no, thanks for being on. Just out of curiosity, what is the end game for an RPG designer? Do you guys do you think about eventually? I want to move out of this career into teaching, or I want to move out of this career into something else, or
like. A lot of the people that have left Paizo, there's kind of like 2 groups of people that have left. Well, okay, 3 groups of people that have left Paizo. The largest group are the ones who have been headhunted by Wizards of the Coast. Now, Wizards of the Coast has come in and they have hired a bunch of incredibly talented and especially minority voices. They've hired a bunch of people who worked at Paizo who have been representing a lot of diverse and underrepresented voices in the gaming industry. Wizards needs that really bad. They're getting their ass kicked over bad representation in D&D. And so they know that they got to get some people that are not middle-aged white dudes writing these things. And Paizo's been doing that shit for 10 years. And so they are smartly coming in and just offering more money to all of these incredibly talented people who work at Paizo. And Paizo, and they're taking a job, as they should. Like that's one way out. The second way is a lot of folks want to do their own thing. They build up enough freelancing that they can freelance full time, and they don't need the 9-to-5 job anymore, or they don't want the 9-to-5 job. Stephen Radney McFarland helped make Pathfinder 2nd Edition, but he'd been with the company for a long time, and he had his own projects he wanted to do. So he left after 2nd Edition came out, and he didn't want to travel to Gen Con anymore because he hates that show. And so he quit rather than go again. But he had his own game. He had his own project he wanted to work on. So a lot of people do that. They quit. They leave full time so they can go back to freelancing. A lot of people found their own company. Rob Schwab, for example.
Tyler the Demon Lord. Damn.
Chris Praman. I mean, these are people that got fired from Wizards and then they create their own company. And they, that's why all these game companies are based in Seattle, right? Because they're all founded by ex-Wizards employees.
It's just one of those things I wonder about, because getting to Wizards or Paizo, that's kind of like, that's the big show for RPG writers. I mean, it's like the major leagues for baseball player.
For sure, yes. But I don't think that we don't. Sometimes I do know. Sometimes people have also taught, like Stephen Randy McFarland also taught gaming at a local college or university here. But he did that in addition to his day job. He didn't get hired to it, mostly because it was really kind of soul-draining work. It wasn't fun. I suspect that a lot of us are going to try and stay in the business as long as possible.
I've been trying to get in there for years.
All you got to do is ask. I'm sitting right here. But you know something? The rock star writer and Chaos Actual Nick Cole has said that for him, he would love to open up a retirement community where the entire activity every day is centered around playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
There's going to be a market for that when we get old.
There's a market for it now. We're old, bro.
Think for yourself.
Yeah, I know. You're still a baby, but you're still.
I'm 39 this month. Holy shit.
I see this youthful face, huh? See? Mm-hmm. I just look young. I'm 48 this year. God damn it. So, all right. Well, hey, that's about an hour. Thanks, everybody, for your time. Any closing thoughts before we wrap things up?
Go buy everything from these wonderful creators, for God's sake. Support these people.
What a privilege to be here with everybody. JR, Ryan, Walt.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for coming, Jason. It was a real pleasure talking to you. And to all our listeners and viewers out there, we will catch you next time on the BAMF podcast. Now, there's an